Hi, my name is Daniel Thomas Moran, and these are a group of poems that should be a book at some point soon, I hope. The first one is called When Nothing Happens. I have stared out through this window before, many times. Who knows the sums of such things? I was there this morning, a fresh mug of coffee, sending the aroma of waking up from the table beside me. Yesterday the trees were the waving arms of children at a parade. The sunrise was a golden flood. In winter the finches were the ghosts of spring, the frozen pond a tomb for the sky. The Christmas cactus was the ebon night above us on the 4th of July, and the hill which lifts this house fell away from the porch like the falter toward eternity. But on this day the glass is only glass, the rain is only the rain. This morning is but the last of last night. The cats are just cats. The leaves of the laurel look as they do, and I am only a man in an old robe, cradling a cooled cup, capped pen in his pocket, and likely to be late for work. A gold case. I have a gold watch, bought in Ile de la Cité on my last lune de miel. It runs well, but 23 minutes fast every day. I look at it, but I never know what time it might really be. It is always sometime just prior. Like me, my wife loves the watch, just as she loved Paris. She often tells me that she loves me as well, except for my always being early, thinking I am right on time. Christmas Eve at the Waldorf Astoria, New York City, 2006. Jesus brought our bags up to room 805 at a little after 3. He stayed only long enough to show us the minibar and how to manage the thermostat. He let us know that room service would bring whatever we desired around the clock. He was shorter than I might have imagined from those paintings of Caravaggio and all of the crucifixes of my childhood. Hair sable and newly cut, he wore a gray uniform, like the others in his place, alive to serve mankind. The outer edge of his heels were burnished by the miles of pavement and carpet. I wanted to ask him about the war and the crying babies in East Harlem, the dripping glaciers, and where to find a thing like justice in a world turning itself inside out. I wanted to know if he could ever recall 63 degrees at the tail end of December in New York City. But I did not wish to add to his burden. The lobby was teeming with Italians and Minnesotans and French and Asians of many kinds, all staring up each time the chimes rolled out from that fabled golden clock. There was only time to press a folded 5 into his palm, to thank him for bearing the weight for us who are travelers. And he smiled in a way which reassured me that, somehow, everything would be all right. Opening the box of Saks Bledshine for Graham Everett. Around 1 a.m., Karen said, even though she was there, that she thought she could almost remember the 60s. Graham said he could even remember the exact moment the 60s ended. I thought I could remember something as well. For me, the 60s were over before they began. I spent my youth making believe that was not true. Last night my sleep was cheated by the full moon. I lay awake thinking of Kerouac and Dan Murray, Karen on a 52 panhead hardtail looking for Janis Joplin. Many of my own years have now expired. It is still hard for me to be entirely where I am. Nonetheless, the three of us are here in lamplight. We have agreed that it is a January night, slowly becoming a January morning. The woods are fast asleep in the fluorescent blush of a burnished moon. We are lucky to be alive after all of the living we have done. Some kind of sonnet for a mayfly. If it be true what learned people say, the mayfly lives for but a day. I'll not shed even the tiniest tear, or wish he'd make it one more year. Instead, I would concentrate on just how grand to live without next week's demand. And among the simple Mayfly facts is, he never once has to file his taxes, or contemplate the waning moon, or anticipate any time but soon. Never repay, but only borrow, or check the weather for tomorrow. It might be luxury, if I may be bold, to be unconcerned about growing old. No time for Betty by, nor alarms to be set, no time for longing or for regret. Not to mention that on his day in May, he might decide to alight or just fly away. Another thing any Mayfly knows, he won't need to shop for winter clothes, never wondering while watching the setting sun why living seems over before it's begun. The Mayfly is the only one who can truly say that the Mayfly has so truly had his day. At 8 in the morn his youth would flower, old age a 25th or 26th hour, never needing to strain his brain to remember where he was on the 24th of September. O Mayfly, how strangely fortunate is the lifetime brief and immediate. Mayfly, whose lifetime is so fleetly fleeting, it would seem so surely worth repeating. Scriptures. Of all to be said of gods and men, drawing truth from the sharpened quill, are the many ways they write of love, and the ease with which they kill. Patti Smith does the Hamptons. Patti Smith, you are not looking good. You must know that. The years have weathered you like a Cape Cod shingle. I suppose you are as angry at this life as you ever were, back when you crawled in from the New Jersey suburbs to hang in the bunker with Burroughs and Ginsberg and Mapplethorpe, the original Bowery fag hag. I can only imagine the suffering endured dragging a brush through that hair. But you stayed on your feet last night, despite the teetering, sustaining yourself with a bottle of Poland Spring. If I had had the chance to actually speak to you, I would have told you that I am a poet too. And if there was any hope of a reply, I might have asked you why you spit on my new shoe. Having been another man's son in Massasecum. 1. How could I have been certain that water could run up a rope? In my universe half the stars were square, feet sweetly soiled, but my loafers shined. The days could be longer than a dozen nights. So very often it seemed like there was someone on the way. While I waited, a lot of notions took up residence in the closets and below the stairs in my head. Nearly all of them were oppugning. 2. So I carried packets of crinkly papers to wrap gold buds as I could afford them, tiny bottles of tetrahydrozoline for the red sclera. My secrets clung tight to mint lifesavers. I might well have slept with 800 women before I was 22. Always fell fatally in love with the wrong ones. They all shared the same handshake. The good Lord was nailed on my wall, sprinkling guilt like soap flakes on every surface. 3. I often stayed up late on sofas in a dark room and watched old black and white movies on a new color portable until after 3, just to be alone with loneliness. 4. My father slept 2 flights up, his belly full of chocolate, his breath sweet with nicotine and tea. At his head a marble bust of Pope Pius XII, a Bible, a clock with a lighted face and a sharp alarm, a closet of neckties and gray corporate wear. He made all his deals with all the wrong people. 5. On the dresser, the Infant of Prague kept a tiny hand raised. The Blessed Virgin, a bare foot upon the serpent's throat, stood beneath the arc of a glass dome so her cerulean robes would not have to gather the dust. 6. My mother slept with one eye open, always ready to put a flame beneath the kettle or extend an arm into the lion's mouth. I could not guess what things plagued her sleep. She never let on. She learned to control it all with acquiescence. 7. Many were the nights, bloodshot, exhausted, and high, that I climbed the stairs one deep pile step at a time, so as to not disturb the darkness, the peace, and the mysterious workings of the Sandman. I found my bed among strange brothers, juxtaposed so as to create distance, an attic room always too hot or cold, atop a house too small for such a perfect dissonance. 8. I closed over the dense curtains and hoped to sleep beyond the mornings, reciting a kind of prayer that when I awoke the house would be empty and the day would have nearly happened without me. I opened my eyes, hoping that there had been a train early that morning with my father on it. It felt almost safe while he was on Fifth Avenue, 31 floors over the shrieks and groans of the Emerald City, tethered to a black phone, arranging for bulldozers and Cadillacs to be sent to Saudi sheiks on ships. 9. On weekdays I walked the 2 miles to school, taking a shortcut over the tracks, tiptoeing over the plank above the third rail, aware that caution might cause me to slip. I laid many pennies for commuter trains to flatten into a lucky piece that I never managed to find. 10. I was witness to the death of the Sunrise Drive-In and Frank Buck's Monkey Mountain. One day they felt they had to bulldoze the zoo and that big screen. They sent the llamas, the pygmy pony, and all the monkeys away, replacing them with black parking spaces, and Sears, and the Jerry Lewis Twin Cinema. We all pronounced it was progress. 11. My path was littered with Newport butts and the sharp tongues of flip-top beers. Before long they had cleared out Zappaland and replaced it with a row of townhouses stretching between our high school and the Neptune Diner. With the price of dope and gasoline, who had money for a meal served on a plate? 12. It would be many years before we learned what the priest at St. Rose's had been doing with the altar boys. Still, the old nuns were sure to teach us that both Hitler and the Jews would be going to hell, and that we worshipped a God who watched us in the shower. 13. One day they closed down the Bohacks on Broadway, where Ron Kovic had worked before Vietnam. No one in town had heard of Seinfeld or Buttafuoco. No one had heard of Peggy Noonan, the Baldwin brothers, or the Stray Cats. But many of us knew where Carlo Gambino lived, and the Weatherman on Channel 4, and Christine Jorgensen too, and where one night Ronald DeFeo killed his family as they slept. 14. The Catholics fasted Fridays on Pepsi and Music Caro's pizza. Everyone dreaded the day when the Negroes would finally make their way across County Line Road. Saturday nights we all lined up behind the angled glass at All-American Hamburgers with our dates, then walked next door for a two-tone with sprinkles at Carvel. 15. Weeknights I waited at the station in the family Chevy for the 519, listening to Bob Grant yell at idiots on the AM radio, while the bar stools all filled and Tom the Butcher locked up for the night. Weekends I tried to stay far from home. After church I tried to stay far from home. Summers I tried to stay far from home. After I finally left, I tried to stay far from home. Today, after so many years, I am never very far from home. The last time we all saw Nanny in Gerritsen Beach. Great-grandmother's house sat at the foot of a pier. Her front yard was a bulkhead. In the near distance, the ribbon of madness called the Belt Parkway girdled the great belly of Brooklyn. Nanny was there with Aunt Dot, grown permanently crabby from living a long life with her mother. Nanny sat fixed in her chair, hair deep white, and far too old to bother standing to greet. Who knew her name was Sadie, short for Sarah, her own mother's name? Richard lived alone downstairs in the basement apartment. He had once belonged to someone, but now he was not right. We only knew him as Cousin Richard, who lived his life downstairs, hanging on to his circumstances by only a thread. Aunt Dot made us tea and offered simple cookies from a box, happy to see her little sister or not. We didn't stay long, even with the thought that they would all be dead before another day like this. We lived by my grandfather's clock, he never forgetting that to Dot and to Nanny he would always be that miserable Guinea bastard who had married my grandmother. They say the Lovejoys were once colonial aristocrats in Maine, with land and with treasure enough for a kingdom. Now it was just Nanny, in her chair by a bulkhead in Gerritsen Beach, preparing her next complaint for Aunt Dot. Before her, jammed into her tiny front room, overlooking 100 yards of oily water, 3 generations of people she had spawned, and that miserable Guinea bastard, hand in his pocket and jingling his keys. To Debbie, after I had already eaten the octopuses. Last night over pizza I told you how last week I had eaten a marinated baby octopus or two in the Japanese restaurant. Actually, I ate 4 of them, all tiny and tender and still, except for the one which was a bit tough. I told you that I had at first hesitated, seeing them there huddled together on the square china plate. But I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of my wife, who was unsure about the idea from the start, or the little Japanese girl who had served them up. I felt like a crow, or worse, some kind of viper, robbing them of their forever unfulfilled lives. I left one there just to show that I wasn't heartless, even in my hunger, capable of the truest mercies. But then you told me of the program that you had watched on The Remarkable Octopus, how they were so smart, possessed of true sentiments, tender creatures, and almost human, you said. I suppose we could have also wept for the pizza. Instead, I thought perhaps those babies might have one day survived to become the terrible giants of the deep, lunging up to grasp a ship of refugees or even eco-tourists on holiday, dragging them down screaming into a grave of briny blackness. So now I prefer to be that brave man who had saved 4 fine ships and the lives of many scores of old women and babies, on the high savage seas fleeing places of hunger and tyrants. A great man with this one regret. One should not trifle with monsters. I should have eaten the last of those wicked little bastards and asked for a second helping. Elegy for Killer Kowalski. Dead 18 August 2008 at age 81 in Boston. I was just a boy when I first saw you inside our old Philco, a mass of a man in tights and a skull cap which put a bolt of lightning on the center of your forehead. You had a chin like a Buick. I loved to watch you storm yourself around the roped ring, stalking that other man, then plowing him face first to the floor. Oh yes, I grimaced knowing what was coming, the dreaded claw hold, mashing your great fingers into his doughy gut, twisting until the contest was finished. There was that day at the Montreal Forum in '54 where you faced down Yukon Eric and earned your name. Walter, you never killed anyone, but no man had ever seen a man's ear ripped from his head and sent flying through the air quite like that.